Hey everybody, it's Minius. This is part 3 of my somewhat awry 3-part lore video on galactic civilization. If you haven't caught the first 2, there's a link in the description box. They give some background information on the mass relay system, the Citadel, and the Citadel Council, and are worth a look, though these videos can really be viewed in whatever the hell order you feel like. The idea behind this galactic civilization lore video series was to give you some background and fun facts about the way people in the galaxy operate. For instance, a standard galactic year, which is about 1.09 Earth years, is actually an average of the Asari, Solarian, and Turian years. A galactic standard day is made up of 20 hours instead of 24, except each hour has 100 minutes, and each minute has 100 seconds, and each one of those seconds is about half the length of a second on Earth. Ultimately, the galactic standard day is about 15% longer than most humans are used to. These little facts are fun, but the galactic community is enormous, and we don't even know how enormous. The active galactic community could have trillions of inhabitants, which is actually said at some point, but that number's probably a little bit high. Javik specifically says that the population of his Prothean cycle at its height was 1 trillion. I'll estimate the population of the galaxy during the time of the trilogy, at least the active sapient population, somewhere around the mid to low 100 billions. That's a half-educated guess. Interestingly enough, the most populated planet that you can visit during the entire trilogy is probably Earth, with a population of 11.4 billion. Yes, that's higher than the Asari, Solarian, and Turian homeworlds. The Batarian hegemony claims the Batarian homeworld of Karshan has 15 billion inhabitants, but even the Codex brushes that number off. While there are a lot of colonies in addition to those homeworlds, each colony's population is rarely over 1 billion, and usually a lot less than that. But whether the Milky Way's population is 100 billion, 500 billion, or several trillion, the point is that it's enormous, and probably too diverse to appropriately cover in a video. We do at least have an idea of how these worlds, often separated by dozens of light years, stay in touch, and can do so via near instantaneous communication. It's through an extensive network of communication buoys that pass along information via lasers. These buoys are essentially miniature but primitive mass relays that create corridors of low mass space that allow tight beam lasers to move faster than light. These networks link up with the real mass relays and spread out over the galaxy. Anybody within a half light second of a comm buoy, which is about 150,000 kilometers or 93,000 miles, can enjoy near instantaneous communication with anyone else who is within a half light second of a buoy. This system does have a bandwidth limit and can't handle billions of people using a buoy at once. Ultimately, the Citadel Council and the Spectres have absolute priority. If, for instance, the Council is using up all of the bandwidth, then everybody else must wait. Individual governments and militaries are in the next highest tier. Below that, priority is sold to the highest bidder, usually media conglomerates and corporations, and those funds are used to maintain and expand the Extranet. Everyone with a computer does have free, guaranteed, and unlimited access to the network, but are last in line. Companies do buy up high-priority access, and then sell that access to people through subscriptions. In order to alleviate the bandwidth problem, a complex array of data caches is set up, which allows for quick access of knowledge to local users. Consumer queries go to the local colony or star system cache. If the information is not available there, a request will be made to the neighboring systems, and so on. Newer colonies or outposts usually have data caches that contain significantly less information, and it takes time for a local cache to accumulate data, even though data storage is cheap. Of course, just because the galaxy is connected doesn't mean the culture is the same. There is one place, though, that best represents civilized culture in the galaxy, or at least has the largest mix of cultures, and that's the Citadel, the enormous central space station with 13.2 million inhabitants from seemingly every species in the galaxy. The majority of this population lives in the wards, or the Citadel's arms, which are the station's most recognizable feature. These arms rotate over each other around 3.5 times a minute, providing gravity through centrifugal force of a near-Earth 1.02 Gs. This force also maintains a breathable atmosphere up to a height of about 7 meters, which is supported by a membrane of colorless gas and mass effect fields. The wards, though, are covered in buildings and towers that rise far above that, and those must be vacuum sealed. Like popular metropolitan cities on Earth, the wards are densely populated and the cost of living is high, too high for a lot of people. Because there is no natural day-night cycle, life in the wards runs continuously, with its citizens managing their own sleep schedule according to their routine. Each of the wards are more or less multicultural, though 4 of the 5 are dominated by the Asari, Solarians, or Turians. Zakera ward features major populations of Volus, Hanar, and Elcor, along with humans. And early on, humans flocked to the Citadel. Just 8 years after first contact with the Turians, over 15% of the station's population was human. In between the metropolitan areas and the station's hull are the Citadel's foundations, a dangerous area filled with life support systems, power plants, and recycling stations. These areas are filled with transients, minorities, criminals, and the occasional stateless exile, and are effectively the station's slums. Officially, though, this area is supposed to be off-limits to everyone but the Keepers, a bizarre insect-like species that cares for the station with a single-minded fanaticism. There really isn't much known about the Keepers. They aren't found anywhere else in the galaxy. They ignore all attempts at communication with mute passive resistance. Keepers can die due to old age or the occasional accident or violence, but their numbers never decrease, though nobody knows how. It's believed that there's some inaccessible inner chamber of the Citadel that continuously spits these creatures out. When the Asari first arrived on the station 3,000 years before the start of the trilogy, the Keepers were there to greet them, and went to great lengths to help the newcomers familiarize themselves with the Citadel. But any communication or study of these creatures beyond that initial contact proved futile. Keepers at least appear completely harmless, and ultimately are so useful when it comes to maintaining the station that it became illegal to interfere or impede them. Keepers help repair damaged sections of the station quickly. If new additions to the Citadel are made by its sapient inhabitants, the Keepers often make those new additions better, or completely rebuild them. Occasionally they head into an area of the wards and rearrange or completely change the architecture without explanation. But even though they serve an important function, the Keepers are largely ignored by the station's other inhabitants, in the same way the Keepers seem to ignore everyone in the first place. These Keepers and everyone else can move from ward to ward through the Presidium, the Citadel's central ring, which is an enclosed loop of park-like space containing the residences of the station's elite. Unlike the wards, the Presidium is carefully managed. Its gravity is maintained by mass effect fields and is about a third of what the rest of the station is. It has a holographic sky that has its own night cycle of 6 hours out of the 20 in the galactic day. It's filled with open-air restaurants, bars, shops, and meeting areas. Even offices and the Citadel embassies located in the Presidium often have no walls, but the area is heavily policed. Surveillance and Citadel security officers are everywhere, and criminal activity rarely meets any success. The Presidium is also home to the station's spaceports, as there is less motion for a ship to match during docking, and its reduced gravity makes it easier to handle cargo. In the center of the ring is the Citadel Tower, which is over 1 kilometer high and contains the Citadel Council. Its gravity is maintained at a 90-degree angle to the rest of the station. While the Citadel is an excellent example of galactic civilization, using it to describe the culture of the entire galaxy is a little like using a multicultural city like New York or London to describe every culture on Earth. It's not quite sufficient. Instead, consider all of these lore videos, at this point I've got 14 with more to come, as your guide to the Milky Way's galactic civilization. And if you like this video, please give it a like. It really helps out the channel. Keep an eye on MiniSGC for more lore and other Mass Effect videos. But for now...
That's pretty damn arrogant.
I apologize if my personality has offended you. Please submit all formal complaints in writing to the Citadel Tourist and Visitor Board.